Everyone loves Konata from Lucky Star. Wrong! Back in 2009, in the imageboard Futaba Channel, whenever someone made a Konata thread in the random discussion board called Nichiura IMG, one specific user would appear and they would start spamming Die Konata, Die Konata, Die Konata, Die Konata, Die, 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 Die! And they did that enough that people started identifying them as Konashine-san, Die Konata-san. And although they were a troublemaker, other posters came up with an idea. An experiment, using Kona-chan as they called her. If whenever Kona-chan is posted, Konashine-san appears to spam Dai Konata, and he doesn't do that on threads that doesn't feature Kona-chan, naturally, what is the middle ground? Just how much Konata does something have to be for him to appear and start spamming? So instead of getting bothered, they started treating the user like a guinea pig. For fun! Is this going to cause a reaction? Is this going to cause a reaction? Is this going to cause a reaction? Is this person Konata? This one-eyed tuft of hair with legs started being posted around as well. This one being a creature that was born unrelated to the experiment a year prior by the artist Ruzara, its name being Sada Konata. And likely inspired by this, many Konata-like creatures started appearing. Is this Konata? Is this Konata? Can you point out if there's any Konatas in this picture? Because that board in specific would only allow pictures on the first post of a thread, whenever Konashine-san was spotted, a festival would occur. A festival being when many threads are created around the same topic. So on the festivals, people would post their edits and drawings in the hope that they would come to the thread and react to them. Now, because people started wondering, what composes Konata? Many posters started using this fictional program called Kona-chan Checker, which would look into a few attributes of the picture to see if what's inside is Kona-chan or not. Usually, it would be if the picture had blue, ahoge, a mole, and cat-shaped mouth. Of course, there were many versions of the program, so how many of those elements it checked would differ from which version was used. And sometimes it would check other elements besides those four. And I said it was a fictional program, but apparently someone made a real one at one point. It is a joke that can still be seen to this day, alongside the sentence, Konashine-san is late, isn't he? When Kona-chan is posted, which was a staple of Kona-chan threads back in the day. So during this course of events, instead of just adding Konata attributes to things, posters took an illustration of Konata with her arm up and started drawing other characters on the exact same pose to see if it would catch Konashine-san's attention, garnering considerable amounts of variations. A series which gained the name Konakora, Kora for collage, but the big majority was actually hand-drawn on top of a base. It was then that one day someone took a Konakora variation of Ikeda-kana from Saki and added just half of her into the original Kona-chan illustration. At the time, this edit was thought to be a Kamen Rider W joke, which was airing at the time, but then other characters started being added as well, those being Nomi Kudravka from Little Busters and Gretel from Otogijushi Akazukin, although it seems they refer to her as Shizumori-san in Nijiura. It was at this point that this picture was posted on the anime board in 4chan, to the horror, amazement, and confusion of the posters. One of which reluctantly stated, "It's Moetron," and many followed along, and thus the girl was given the name Moetron and was adopted by the anime board in 4chan, becoming their new daughter, and for many years they would celebrate the day they met her as well. Apparently they came up with their own mashup characters as well, Imototron, Best Girl, Mokotron, typical shonen battle hero, although I don't believe that much came out of it. Desutron never got any meaningful attention. Well, at the very least Senpai noticed. Yeah, Senpai noticed. It was after that this version of Konakora received the name KimeKona in Futaba, a name that stands for Chimera Konata. So she was born in Futaba in IMG, raised in 4chan, and later returned there, which also spread to other boards. And I saw people saying there were some differences between Moetron and KimeKona of each board, so they were treated differently. But at this point I doubt anyone cares that much. From what I'm seeing though, they were sharing some jokes back and forth related to her, such as having Richter Belmont from Castlevania seeing the abomination and screaming, "Die monster, you don't belong in this world." Although it wasn't so clear if the Japanese side really understood why 4chan was using Richter. It also seems that one of the jokes both sides enjoyed was making KimeKona/Moetron poor and making her live inside a cardboard box. You can see her with the poor girl from Madoka Magica, the one who can't afford a computer. Both sides seem to have enjoyed making her a little bit miserable. One thing that seems to have been born from 4chan is her desire to own a scooter. The character Throughts also appears here and there with Moetron, a girl who tries to be mean, but due to her incompetence of it, she just ends up being cute. And some Futaba members seem to have enjoyed her existence back then as well, although it wasn't so clear if they really understood what she was though. 4chan users even planned to make a Moetron visual novel, but it's clear that project is dead now, sadly. And in Futaba, her threads will be open with her saying, "Kita yo, I came over." Later, elements from Hatsune Miku and Ika Musume were added as well. There's also a variation with Hardcatch Precure elements added to it. Besides that, both sides were happy with her and enjoyed the idea of shared parenthood. Eventually, Konashine-san went to the preparation board of Futaba, which is a place where posters send messages directly to the administration. Konashine-san complained, "Those guys keep making Konata threads 24/7 and keep calling me. Deal with it." Which apparently, users on the board responded with, "What? What are you talking about? You're crazy." "Oh, that's just a layout of a house I'm planning to make." He eventually caused trouble on the preparation board and thus he got banned from the website. Although with him gone, posters would still joke once in a while that they were waiting for him to appear. "Konashine-san is late, isn't he?" But for the most part, Konakora and KimeKona left the mind of posters. For a while. Everyone loves Mahou Shoujo Madoka Magica. Wrong! This critic, called Kurose Yohei, was rather critical of Madoka Magica, and the critiques of another critic, and the otaku that enjoyed that critique. Those critiques were posted on iChannel, 2channel, which was then posted on the summary blog Yaraon, and the comments of that blog were very critical of the whole situation, it seems. While he was talking about this on Twitter, a supporter of Kurose just nonchalantly mentioned that the person who ran the Yaron blog was a Nijura user, and the Pandora box was open. Anonymous online communities did not like websites like Yaron, who would summarize threads and put them on their blogs for ad money. So now this combo got the attention of Nijura users. What do you mean the Yaron guy is among us? And as the conversation proceeded, Kurose says, "By the way, due to Umerabo's guidance, I understand the wonderfulness of Nijura." So the critic as well was a Nijura user. But who the hell is Umerabo? So Nijura users looked into this guy and they found this nice picture of him doing a peace sign. Oh, what's going on here? The investigation led to them learning that this was not something done as a hobby by one of their members. It was an actual paid commission for the office of cultural critic Hiroki Azuma. Some people might think that name is familiar. Yes, it is, the Japan Otaku Database Animals writer. And Futaba posters were not really happy to learn about that. They also noted that around the time this was all happening, there were some very suspicious KimeKona posts that had appeared, and it was at a time they weren't really being made anymore. Mentioning things like an artwork of Angel Goddess KimeKona, about how they couldn't help but post the picture on Tumblr, posts with the same KimeKona edit that was used on Umerabo's piece, although it was captioned as Moetron at first but then fixed, posts mentioning Ume with the same kanji as Umerabo, edits of KimeKona posted which didn't follow the general idea of past works and were called Murakami Takashi style, who is a known contemporary artist, and they were all done on the same software. Also, Umerabo had tweeted, "Whoa, the KimeKona thread's on fire!" So yeah, it was probably him, almost likely him. At the end of it, they were led to the name Chaos Lounge. And now that is a new term, Chaos Lounge. What is Chaos Lounge? So Chaos Lounge is a contemporary art group. Contemporary art being used to describe art created from the middle of the 1900s to this day, with heavy focus on otaku imagery on the digital space. However, this group began as another group called Post Poppers by a man that went by Fujishiro Uso. The group started in March 2008 from members that catch the attention of Uso in sites like Pixiv, Twitter, and Mixi, one of them being Umerabo. And they got their first exhibit in September of 2008 in Geisai 11, art fair produced by Murakami Takashi. At first, those exhibits worked more as a sort of offline meeting for the group. It was in March 2010, in Geisai 14, that Kurose Yohei was there as part of a group of critics. And it was through his intervention that Post Poppers had a live painting called Let's Make Tsukasa, a collaborative piece that was done with the single instruction of Let's Make Tsukasa. On the exhibit Chaos Lounge 2010 in Takahashi Collection Hibiya that happened a month after Geisai 14, it was there where they exhibited a new Let's Make Tsukasa amongst other things, and it was also from then that Kurose had joined Chaos Lounge, the group becoming managed by both Uso and Kurose. It was also then that the group's focus went from offline meetings into contemporary art. And as you can see, besides their drawings, they make heavy use of already existing artwork for collages. It was for this exhibit that Kurose released the Chaos Lounge Declaration, which positioned the group as born in the ever-expanding architecture of the new information environment called the Internet, and creating pieces from it, rejecting past notions of art. I think that's what it was trying to say. Something around those lines, and maybe even more, but I have a hard time understanding when people talk artistically. It's also hard to focus with Konata going around the screen. There were many Chaos Lounge members in the history of the group, however, this video is mostly going to mention only 3 of them: Kurose, Uso, and Umerabo, who were all receiving backlash as this was happening. Umerabo posts on his blog an apology about directing people on Twitter to Futaba and makes clear that he did not intend to make it sound like the character was made by him. Kurose later appears on a livestream talking about it. There was an apology of Umerabo, but it was regarding his conduct towards the community. He makes it very clear that it was not an apology regarding the usage of the image.
画像を使ったっていうことではなくて、その前に梅ラボ個人が悪い振る舞いがあったっていうことだけで、そっから先のことはコミュニケーションできません。
また使う、またごめんね、また使う、またごめんねっていうのを繰り返す。
いやいや、だから使ってることに対してごめんねはないわけですよ。
何に対して謝ってるの？
だからその前の振る舞いだって言ってるわけですよ。
Umerabo makes another blog post and it becomes clear there's no mention of removing or replacing the character on the piece, and he explicitly states he would keep his methods of creating art by gathering images online and making use of them. He also gave an explanation of his piece. It was based on sites of the Tohoku earthquake of March 2011, where he put all sort of characters spread and abandoned across the landscape, and KimeKona can be seen as a sort of goddess of salvation or as the one that brought divine retribution. That didn't help, because it felt like he was using this disaster as a justification for using the character. Kurose appears on another livestream, this time commenting on copyright issues that started being raised regarding Chaos Lounge members' works.
キャラクター文化とか非常に密接に関わっていることで、要するに梅ラボが作品を作って売るっていうのは、要するにコミケと同人誌を作って版権も同人誌作って売るってことと、営みとしては何も変わりがないわけで、梅ラボの作品が犯罪だって言うと、その文化を否定することになっちゃうので、摘発されない限りは版権ものの、絵を描いて売ってコソコソやっていけばいいっていうのをなんか いつか終わるに決まってるんだから、そんなのは制作ができるように、作品発表できるようにっていう場所を作れるために、梅ラボ自身もそのためだったら自分も矢面に立つと言ってるし、僕もそうなんで、だからそれがちゃんとできるような場所に展覧会していきたいと思います。
And with this, more and more fuel was being added to the fire. Fujishiro Uso also came in defense of Umerabo in a very long blog post. But the part to focus now is that he also made it very clear that Chaos Lounge would keep using images found online to create future pieces of work. So yeah, this ended up fanning the flames even further. As this was all happening, people got motivated to start digging into Chaos Lounge, which led to people finding even more fuel to add to the fire. At first, they looked into their arts to criticize them for it. On top of using print art and images found online, cases of tracing, Fujishiro Uso has done a few of them. Umerabo also had instances of doing it. They also started making fun of an original illustration of him called Nico Nico Dragon. They found art pieces by Kurose and made a game of trying to find out which art from where he was using on them. And there was this one piece that baffled them, which was like a piece of wire. So right when this all started happening, the June edition of the magazine Bijutu Techo was released, where there was an 8-page segment on Chaos Lounge. And in the middle of it, there was a big page spread of one of Umerabo's works, with another modified version of KimeKona. Although this was released before the whole backlash, so it was a little bit too late to focus on that. So they focused on the usage of many company logos, people's images, official arts and fan arts, game sprites, you can see a lot of Toho there, the image of Emperor Komei, using the image of emperors being taboo, and images of the Akihabara stabbings even. A lot of stuff that made people think, I don't think you can do that. Microsoft might not like that. Looking into their exhibits, they learned about a time where fake 1,000 yen bills were printed in a collaborative exhibit and then were sold, which seemed to have been a homage to an incident involving artist Akasagawa Genpei. But of course that was still against the law. In the same exhibit where they showed the second Let's Make Tsukasa, several manga, doujinshi and illustrations were ripped and spread over the floor, and visitors were invited to step on them, which was seen as disrespectful. There were also illustrations from Megami magazine and figures that were ripped, broken and splashed with paint, and then exhibited as pieces. They also found out that on an exhibit by Fujishiro Uso, held in Murakami Takashi Kaikai Kiki's Hidari Jingaro Gallery, there were many commercial arts that were printed on paper, splashed with water, signed, and then exhibited. Some of them were sold. And even the designer of the K-On! CD jackets ended up seeing that and complaining about it on Twitter. And by this point, this controversy had already spread way beyond Futaba. As you can see, Twitter is getting into this. For example, this tweet mocking this whole incident and hiding behind the term contemporary art, which was written by Hirano Kota, aka the author of Hellsing. Abe Yoshitoshi also gave her thoughts about it, known for his character designs in Rain and Technolize. 2Channel, for example, started having tons of threads in many different boards, mostly on the art and design board. And reports were being made against Chaos Lounge to many different companies and even the police. They found Chaos Lounge had collaboration products such as tote bags and iPhone covers. At the very least, I know the iPhone covers were recalled and stopped being sold by the people who released them, under the guise of having violated their artwork's guidelines. So Pixiv was having a collaboration with the 7th Hakurei Jinja Reitaisai, the biggest Toho related event there is. and they were asking people for art to be used for the event. It was discovered that Umerabo had made pieces from compositing many of the fan arts submitted for this collab, which were then used to decorate a hotel room. And then later, it was learned that pieces that also used these illustrations were also exhibited and sold in an event in Taiwan. And at this point, even the head priest stopped sipping on his beer to comment about it, but then he goes back to sipping his beer. People, of course, were reporting Chaos Lounge members' accounts in Pixiv, and Umerabo's account was closed once, but reinstated. And it was at this point that people started having doubts towards Pixiv. Are they protecting Chaos Lounge? Because now it became clear Chaos Lounge was taking stuff directly from Pixiv and profiting from it, but their accounts stayed intact. One interesting point about this Reitaisai collab was that one of the regulations was that they were requesting the illustrations to be submitted with transparent backgrounds. And a new theory was being raised. They requested that so that Chaos Lounge could easily use them. This might feel like a leap in logic, but they had learned from a Kurose tweet that the hotel collaboration was made possible through the intermediation of the CEO of Pixiv, Katagiri Takanori, which then allowed them to collab with the art collective Team Rabo. They had other appearances with Pixiv, and of course, as you already know, they had the connections and support of Murakami Takashi and Hiroki Azuma. Kurose having his debut as an art critic in a publication of Hiroki Azuma's company. Murakami held several exhibits and got them in a roundtable discussion between him and Chaos Lounge members on a previous edition of Bijutsu Techo. However, he did got on bad terms with Chaos Lounge before this happened, with a discussion that started when they exhibited a piece that was strikingly similar to one of his protege, Mr. And he was extremely critical of Kurose Yohei. And he was also very critical of her handling of the whole KimeKona incident as well. Azuma too didn't plan to support them in this case, however, all these connections made people suspicious of Pixiv backing Chaos Lounge. So it was here that people decided to perform a two-step plan. They would take Umerabo's Pixiv account and the account of another person who did similar works, and they would report them at the same time. The result? The other person's account gets closed, but Umerabo's stay intact. And now for the step 2. Complain! People started directing their protests towards Pixiv, claiming favoritism. If that guy's account was closed, why isn't this guy's account closed? We're doing the same thing! And the result was... nothing happened to Umerabo's account. It just stayed there. But the plan still led to interesting results. Because the other account that was closed, it was brought back. And now I want to go on a huge tangent. I want to go back to 2003, 8 years before this controversy even started. Who the hell is this old man? Well, in 2003, there was this user in Nijura who would identify themselves by the trip code Majiresu, a term that means to respond seriously. He was a troll on the board who would do things like creating multiple threads at the same time to make the catalog the same picture, an act which was called catalog, causing annoyance to other posters. Eventually this picture was posted, which showed 4 notorious trolls of the board coming together for an offline meeting, Majiresu being the guy in the red flannel shirt. Some posters seeing this try to provoke Majiresu using the picture to make photoshops. After a collage where they put his face on the DVD of a gay adult video called Uma Ajishinshi, Majiresu edits started blowing up in popularity and a new sort of culture in the website was created. It was later revealed that the troll Majiresu wasn't the same person on the picture. As a matter of fact, no one really knows who those people were. But that didn't stop posters to keep making edits of this man and making him into his own character separated from the troll Majiresu. Perhaps it was because of his slightly twisted smile or the angle of his thumbs up pose, but something about him won over many people, and in the end, petabytes of edits ended up being produced. According to them, of course, that number is ridiculous. I'm not going to go into this guy in too much detail, but I do want to talk about some things which will become relevant here. The flag of Macedonia. It's the name used to refer to this red and yellow sunburst background, which is similar to the flag of North Macedonia. A picture with Majiresu's face on the front of it was used as the first post of a threads. It was also used on many edits due to its flashiness. Hiraki. Hiraki in Japanese means open, and can refer to fish that was cut in half and then open. In their edit terms, it means taking one half of a face and mirroring it. It was a technique created so they could obtain front-facing faces from the original troll's picture. But later, it became customary for them to go beyond that picture and go, I don't know who this is, but for now, let's just hiraki it and see what comes out. Zettai ni yurusanai yo. This became Majiresu's catchphrase and it means absolutely unforgivable. It was based on a comment the original Majiresu posted on a thread. Unforgivable angle, a term used to describe Majiresu's stance from the original picture. An angle that transcends the human form and can be recognized from simple objects. And this is not directly related to Majiresu, but I do want to mention it. The derivative meme, Zettai Yurusanae, was born on the Toho board, which reflected how unforgiving she was towards yokai in Undefined Fantastic Object, UFO. Sanae is usually portrayed with the flag of Macedonia and the unforgivable angle. Since Yurusanae is hard to translate, the usual translation of the meme in English, it's annihilate, which sounds like annihilate. It was first used on a translation of the diary comic Hanging There, Kokasa-san. So in November 2005, the Nijura server Nov was open, and it became a place of gathering for posters that would say things like, if you have time to type a post, then post a picture instead, turning the board into one of the most chaotic ones on the website and a breeding ground for Majiresu editors. However, by the end of 2008, portrayal rights online became more strict, and so edits of real people became prohibited. Posts started being deleted, getting to a point where posting Majiresu would get the poster banned. Users of the website which could not accept this became known as the Majistance, the Majiresu Resistance, a group of people who would oppose the administration by creating threads of edits of Majiresu and getting banned for it, sometimes dragging others with them. According to this wiki I read, the Majistance was akin to a religious organization, and getting banned was not a punishment for them. It was an important ritual to be able to reach the land of gentlemen. But just mentioning this very quickly, I saw reports that this place was so chaotic that eventually many started leaving and population dwindled. In 2010, the administrator curbed the amount of posts saved on the board, probably as a means to restrain trolling. But in August, the administrator had enough and the whole server was closed down altogether. The Majistants lost the place they called home. They would gather here and there in other boards and sites, but for the most part they became vagrants. So some time passes, and the whole Chaos Lounge thing is happening. Upon learning that Chaos Lounge declared that they would keep using stuff found online, the Majistants took that as a permission to use the image of their members to create edits. They took base in another Nijura board, and when the administration saw that, they turned to the other side and pretended they didn't see it. That was simply a base though, not really a place they could call home. And now we finally return to the two-step plan. The one where Umerabo and some other person's account were reported. Upon seeing that, the Majistants had a few realizations. According to Chaos Lounge, the edits that they've been doing this whole time, they were not just dumb edits, they were contemporary art. And due to Pixiv reinstating the closed account, they pretty much said contemporary art is allowed in this website. The Majistance has found their new home. The promised land that they have been searching this whole time. The Holy Land, Yurusaren. And they start spamming the contemporary art tag in the website with their edits. According to the Pixiv dictionary page for Majiresu, at one point there was one edit posted every 10 seconds. If that went on for a whole day, that would have been 8,640 posts. And of course, people start noticing this, besides what's already happening with Chaos Lounge. Channel, which usually held animosity towards Futaba, decided to join hands with them for this incident. Twitter became a huge ground of discussion regarding this whole thing. Even people on Pixiv were seeing what was happening and going, what the hell? But also, that seems fun. I'm going to take part on it too. I'm going to keep mentioning the group as Majistance, but from my understanding, it did end up with much more people than the original group in Futaba. So during this whole commotion, many memes and characters were born, which I'm going to talk about now. At least the ones that I could understand, because there were an insane amount of them. And it's not going to be in order, because I have no idea what the exact order is. At first, they were memeing on the members of Chaos Lounge, making many edits with them, and they started evolving. At one point, when making edits with Kurose, someone said it wasn't omoshiroi. The word means interesting, but in its literal reading, it means a face that's white. So they made his face white, and so was born Shirose, replacing the part of his name with the kanji for black with the kanji of white. It made him look archaic, so they put an appropriate hat on him. There was one type of edit that made rounds. Someone took Uso's face and put it on a frog, no particular reason why, and it was called Uso Gaeru. Many of them were posted on Pixiv, but were promptly deleted and accounts got banned. Of course, Pixiv took note of what was happening and wouldn't let this sort of thing stay up. Whenever something got deleted, the Majistance would call it getting managed. These frog edits in particular became known for being managed the most, so they started calling it Kaeru Bomb, as in frog bomb, because it was almost inevitable that the account would be lost. Remains of it on the contemporary art tag being original illustrations, because those were much more likely to not have been managed. Those deletions only made things worse though, because the accounts of Chaos Lounge members were untouched, and there were even original illustrations that were being deleted amidst all this mess, just for using the contemporary art tag. At one point, because there was no clear guidelines to what gets deleted, things became a game of chicken to see what sort of post gets deleted or not. So one of the things that got caught on the crossfire, it was just a picture of a cicada, which led them to joke that cicadas requested a takedown, that cicadas had power on Pixiv, and even that the CEO of Pixiv was actually a cicada. One type of posts that can be seen are submissions that make the same use of Kurose's black and white arts, which they called kasane, a word that means piling up things on top of each other. Of course, there were many Majiresu related things. You can see a ton of flags of Macedonia, but another character that came from Nov that can be seen a lot on the tag is the character known as Itaru Slime, a metal slime from Dragon Quest with the face of Ayu from Canon. The illustrator of the game being Hinoe Itaru, thus Itaru Slime. It was a character used when people needed to attack with numbers, and it was used in previous catalog in Nov. And you can see remains of the same attack performed in the contemporary art tag on Pixiv. So while they were making edits, someone accidentally posted this picture of Makise Kurisu from Steins Gate drinking Dr. Pepper and then going puha. And in true fashion of the Majistance, they just took the picture and decided to hiraki it. You would expect them to hiraki Christina, but the Majistance had different sensibilities. So they hirakied the puha part, the sound effect, and the result ended up looking like a bird. And from that, the puha puha bird was born. They later decided to turn the puha puha bird into a cute girl. They took the bird part of it and turned into a hoodie, and from that, Puhako was born. So because Hiroki Azuma was involved in all this mess, of course they were memeing on him as well. But the next character is not actually him, it's a dog. They took this dog, which they thought it was Hiroki Azuma's, and put it on the body of a leaping cat that looked like it was doing the unforgivable angle pose. They call it Art Dog. Later they learned it wasn't actually his dog, it was this cute fella called Cinnamon, which was the mascot of the company Hatena. The CEO of the company was the owner of the dog. But they didn't care, of course. They later also turned the art dog into a cute girl. Its name going from Ato Inu to Azato Inu. Azatoi meaning sly, calculating, and also people who are aware of her cuteness and use it to their favor. Because she has the body of a cat, despite being a dog, she says nya. Also, one day, someone made this illustration of Puhako and Azato Inu taking a purikura together, which was decorated with the phrase Zuttomo Sengen. Zuttomo being a slang for friends forever, and Sengen meaning declaration. So the message is basically BFFs. However, the V's decorating the sides of the sentence look like the katakana re, so the sentence could also be read as Rezutomo Sengen, which changed the meaning to Lesbian Friends Declaration. And because of that, Azato Inu became a raging lesbian character, the majority of the time towards Puhako. So one of the other Chaos Lounge members that was brought into these edits was the girl who worked as a sort of PR for Chaos Lounge, Nahoruru. Mostly her hair was put into different things. On a picture she was dressed in a black sailor uniform. She also started being drawn as an anime girl, and that portrayal gained quite a bit of popularity. Despite the types of edits the Chaos Lounge members were receiving, it does seem she was on good terms with the Majistance while this was all happening, spouting their memes and stuff like that. And it seems they also took a liking towards her. It seems she already had left Chaos Lounge a little after this was all happening. I'm not sure when she left, I also don't think it matters that much. Ushijima Iniku is an adult-oriented cosplayer and gravure idol. She was amongst one of the people who went on Twitter to participate in the discussion as she sided with Chaos Lounge and Umerabo. She also had collaborated with them in the past, so the Majistants went, okay. They took her Twitter profile picture, hiraki it, removed the part that was meant to represent her, and moved the sparkling bit to become something like eyes, and this little red stag beetle-like creature was born, its name being Kwami. As it became customary now, Kwami was anthropomorphized into a cute girl, most of the time exposing a lot of skin, not unlike the source. So one of the nicknames for Majiresu was Osan, which means old man, but there were actually another Osan in this contemporary art chaos. There's this one specific, cute cartoon character holding a drawing tablet and pen, and there are a lot of submissions using this character. That is the profile picture of illustrator Takahashi Kenji, who was one of the professional illustrators that joined the Contemporary Art Festival on Pixiv. As a matter of fact, it seems he was doing so since the very beginning. He was very critical of Pixiv's management and their defenders on Twitter. He was an illustrator for Dengeki PlayStation magazine and was part of Gainax. But if you start looking into his works, you also get to see Futaba related characters. So he was fanning the flames and gave permission for anyone to do whatever they wanted with their profile picture to be used as material. Another character that appeared on the Contemporary Art Festival was the kaiju Jamira. Its weakness being water, it was used in a joke relating to Fujishiro Uso's water splashing pieces. The joke caption, "A sudden death," was also popular at the time. One picture of Jamira was deleted alongside that cicada. When posters asked Tsuburaya Pro, owners of Ultraman, if they sent takedown requests, they denied it, and Takahashi Kenji posted an illustration he made of the character and went, "Use this one!" And so Jamira became a staple of the Contemporary Art Festival. So there was this one user on Twitter that went by Genmai-cha, which is green tea with toasted brown rice. They took an anti-Chaos Lounge stance, but would approach things more methodically and logically, while also being relentless, giving explanations and summarizations of what was going on. They would get into debates with many people related to this incident as well, and it seems that due to their demeanor, they started being represented as a mature woman wielding a blade, which I believe represented them cutting down Twitter discussion opponents. To contrast with that, there was this one Twitter user which the Majistance started treating like a man-child. They got into a discussion with Genmaicha, which ended up with them saying, "If you're going to put it that way, then let me just say this one thing. Kusobaka! You goddamn idiot!" And then they blocked Genmaicha. And so the phrase Kusobaka! Broku! became popular amongst the Majistance. So the Majistance took this user profile picture, they hierarchy it, and what came out became this hairy creature called Kusobaka. Of course, they turned Kusobaka into an anime girl, which ended up being Kusobaka-chan. Some treated the eyes of the creature as headphones, some just drew it as part of her hair. Because the original drawing was of Menma from Anohimita Hana no namae wo boku tachi wa mada shiranai, Kusobaka-chan was put on the same dress as Menma. But on a nicer note, Kusobaka and Genmaicha would apologize for their behavior towards each other and then reconcile. And now it just dawned on me how insane this all is. These are all just Twitter feuds getting fan art. Amongst the arts in the contemporary art tag, one will be able to see a cat with a spear. This is based on a man called Fujita Naoya. He's another critic. And this one took an anti-Chaos Lounge position. If anything, they took a pro-Majistance position. He also thought they were funny. Because he liked Hello Kitty, he used a picture of a cat dressed like it as his Twitter icon, which led to the Majistance referring him as Sanryo, or Sanryo Lens, which made reference to a character known in Futaba by the same name. Fujita Naoya later will be a judge in the event called Japan Otaku Awards 2011, an event that looked back into works and topics that defined a year, with each judge presenting 6 different topics which would all be voted amongst each other, and they had about 40 submissions. The Majistance was one of the entries in the tournament and became one of the 9 finalists. They did not win, but they got a judge award from Fujita Naoya. He requested comments from the Majistance and he showed 2 of them. There's no consensus between us, and I'll get you back 100 times fold in 3 days, take a note of that. Which was one of the sentences attributed to the troll Majiresu back in the day. So this girl with these lovely jagged teeth is called Q-chan, and they were based on this person with many names, but they were all a variation of Quadro, and it was based on Nvidia's Quadro graphic cards. The easier way you could describe this person is, "You fool! I have 70 alternative accounts!" Actually, more than that, Tales of this event says they had over 100 accounts banned, and according to the person themselves, it was over 200 accounts banned on Pixiv and many accounts banned on Twitter. They were an agent of chaos who kept trying to drag as many people into this whole mess, trying to reach out for many known artists and people in the industry and getting into many fights. Not only national artists and people of the industry, I saw them tagging Moot, owner of 4chan at the time, the Museum of London. He tried contacting Obama, for Christ's sake! I saw a comment that if they ever came in contact with you, you should not react, not even block them, because they would use one of their alts to start messing with you. So all in all, very chaotic person. Also, the little doll Q-chan carries around, it seems to be the one used on Quadro's profile pictures. So there's this ongoing campaign in Japan called Oashisu Undo. Oashisu standing for Ohayou gozaimasu, good day. Arigatou gozaimasu, thank you. Shitsurei shimasu, excuse me. Sumimasen, I'm sorry. It is mostly taught to kids, so they're aware to add them to their vocabulary. At the Contemporary Art Festival, in a way to critique Hiroki Azuma, they changed the meaning of the campaign. This was because before the whole KimeKona controversy happened, he called Umerabo's work a masterpiece. But after things started going down, they thought he was trying to get away from responsibility by saying things like he wasn't an art critic. So the Oasis Undo was modified into Ore janai, wasn't me. Aitsu ga yatta, that guy did it. Shiranai, I don't know. Sunda koto. There's nothing more to be said, it's over. Now, unfortunately, the process which led to the birth of the following character is likely lost. The links I found were dead, but in the end, I believe I got something that is this or similar to this. And so the limbless mecha girl Oashisu Hime, Oashisu Princess, was born, and she had the ability to control tetrapods. I think that in itself is an inside joke, but I don't really get it that well. People refer to the Nijura maid board as Bohate, aka breakwater, so that probably has to do with it. As a matter of fact, there were many tetrapods on the Contemporary Art Festival, and I have learned that apparently there's people with tetrapod fetishes. And I guess I can see why. It does look like a torso with open legs. Yep. So, on a breath of fresh air, the following character was not born out of people fighting on Twitter or as a means to criticize someone. The Obon festival was nearing, and they went, oh okay, let's hiraki bon. So they hirakied and modified the kanji of bon and ended up with this. The main notable parts of it is the two lines on the side which looks like twin tails and the upside down heart. And so Bon-chan was born, the brown-skinned, pink-haired girl who wears a one piece that has an inverted heart hole carved into it. Apparently she doesn't wear panties, and her dress is pretty much designed so you can almost see the important parts. Hooray! Okay, I'm going to go a little faster, because from this point on, it just becomes harder and harder to understand what the characters and the jokes are. This annoyed Miku is based on a Twitter user called Eternal Toho, or Eto, but instead of Eternal, people would always call him whatever they felt like it as long as it started with E. He was a notorious poster on Twitter and got into a discussion with Takahashi Kenji, who did not take him seriously at all. By the end of it, the old man told him he could come back, but he should prepare himself and that would be his homework. He became known in the Majistance as the punching bag of the old man, sometimes a little more than that, and they kept joking about his endless homework. Despite being Miku, they are portrayed as a guy. These two are characters created to represent the Pixiv management, Sakujo Rin-san and Un-ei Rinin-san. Sakujo meaning deletion and Un-ei meaning management. Jamira Nyorai is a mix between Jamira, the head from Mawaru Penguin Drum, and the body comes from the cover of a book called Introduction to Anti-Art. The author had made a critique of Chaos Lounge before. Tamago Kake Rider was born from a picture of soy sauce being poured into Tamago Kake Gohan. I have no idea what the original picture was. There were two other bird characters born. The Puna Puna bird, unfortunately I'm not sure what the origin of this one is, and the Komake bird, who was born by modifying a drawing of Kurisu where she says Komake kottai inda yo, don't worry about the details, which was popular in 2channel. I think this is the original picture. There were lots of screws, just a lot of them. There were these knights who were called Yokushira Knights. Yokushiranai means I don't really know much. And they were characters created to criticize people who would jump into the controversy without looking into things beforehand. So pretty much the knights had the courage to engage in battle without obtaining information first. Wakateru-san was born in a comic from a website that tells the news in comic form. At the end of the comic, the girl goes, "Does the people at Pixiv administration understand? Wakateru? Do you understand?" And I could not find remains of the original picture. Sometimes you see mentions of 10 points. In Pixiv, there used to be a score system instead of a like one, just like YouTube. And people were rather influenced by it. So they started joking about that as well, usually in submissions related to dogs, but also telling other people 10 points as a way to confuse them. There was this user on Twitter who really really seemed to dislike Quadro. Their handle was 7th Heaven, which then became the character Nanaten-chan. Nana meaning 7, 10 meaning heaven. And it is around here that things start getting more vague. Information becomes harder to come by due to it all being so esoteric. I had to Google to find the word esoteric, I never used that in my life. So there's this Kaguya from Toho who drinks plum wine. The account name of this person had the name of a mushroom, and they said something about plum wine being tasty, but I have no idea what the context is. There's this Russian girl that I think was based on someone who said, "Douseki nin toru tsuneri nanda." How do you intend to take responsibility? However, they were made fun of because they wrote tsuneri, which means pinch, instead of tsumori, which means intend. The character's name became Gakinchov Tsunerinovich. There's a few shinkus from Rose and Maiden. I'm not sure why. There's probably not even a big reason for it. There's a lot of Bukubu edits. One source says he was the one behind everything that was happening. That is because Futaba-min, which means Futaba citizens, sounded similar to Fuminbain, which was the name of Bukubu's doujin circle, so people started joking about it saying, "Damn you, Fuminbain!" There is this other girl with a blade who I think is an alternative design for Genmai-cha, but I'm not sure. She's cinnamon flavored though. There's a few boomerangs, and it seems to be a slang of something that you say that comes back at you eventually. It's also on the unforgivable angle. I am not sure why they kept saying "iki dekinai," as in I can't breathe. Sometimes it's like "iki dekiru?" Can you breathe? "Iki dekinai." You can't. And that appears a lot actually. They were just doing whatever came up. Kurose got into a discussion with Genmai-cha, and they said he was going to eat some onigiri. And they went, "Oh, he said onigiri, let's start using that." And onigiris started appearing in their images. When the K-On! CD Jacket artist learned about Uso's art, Uso tweeted about eating parfait, and they just started using it. Arabic Yamato, Ajinomoto, launching things into space, which they used to do before this whole mess started. There's a magic card that appears here and there, they call it Art Grandpa. There's this Vocaloid Ren looking character who they refer to as Wall. What survived the management, what currently remains in this tag, is just a casserole of inside jokes. Oh, that is a Pixiv blog of someone talking about what was happening, and they hirakied it and started using it in their images. It was just anything goes. It's actually kind of funny to see posts from Murakami Takashi's account in the middle of all this mess. There's like 2 pieces of art which gather a lot of these characters, which I was using as a guide to start recognizing them, and I think I did a good job learning what most of them were, but there's still a lot of stuff that I have no idea what it's even about. Also, I just realized that on this picture there's like a truck about to hit KimeKona, and I think there might be some sort of joke there, but I'm also not sure. Anyways, on Futaba, there was a popular reaction picture called Andrew WK who heard there was a festival going on and couldn't hold back, so he rushed over, which is the exact same caption given to him when he made an appearance in the TV show Rock Fujiyama in 2006. And that picture was the basis to what's likely the biggest event during the Contemporary Art Festival, where this picture of Andrew WK was spammed in the Contemporary Art tag, although a lot of them were eventually managed. But not only the original pictures and edits were posted, but due to many artists taking part on this festival, there were hundreds of original illustrations featuring all sorts of characters doing the Andrew WK pose, coming over because they heard there was a festival going on. But even though they were original illustrations, a lot of them also started being managed and accounts were being banned, while Chaos Lounge members' accounts stayed unharmed. It furthered the feeling that Pixiv was defending Chaos Lounge, and the unclear reasoning of deletion made some lose trust on the management. So there started being reports of people leaving the website towards competitors, those named Chinami and Pixiv. Chinami being a medium-sized platform which existed before Pixiv, and Pixiv being a small-sized one. At one point, Chinami saw 200 times the account registrations in a day than usual, while Pixiv saw 100 times more. And they themselves were working hard to strengthen their servers due to the sudden influx of new members. Alright, so Pixiv is getting rammed from outside and inside, news websites are talking about it and people are starting to leave. They have no choice but to address the situation and they do so on a blog post. They reject that they were related to Chaos Lounge because the group was composed of Pixiv members. There were cases of them being presented in events and magazines alongside each other. The transparency thing for Reitaisai was for the use of the event as agreed with the event's organizers. They also said they didn't act promptly regarding Chaos Lounge accounts because there was no contact from copyright holders regarding their works, and they can't decide by themselves what constituted infringement. They also claimed that deleted illustrations and accounts were due to them violating their terms of service, naming threats against the company, their employees and their families, images that defame individuals, creating several accounts for the sake of misuse of the website, and actions that deliberately put burdens on their servers. And they denied it was solely used to them being uploaded on the contemporary art tag. And they also promised to do better in the future. It was also then that Chaos Lounge accounts were closed. However, Pixiv had no hand in that. They simply decided to close it themselves. Although it didn't fully took the attention out of Pixiv and Chaos Lounge, it was here that things started calming down. By this point, Chaos Lounge didn't really receive any lawsuits. They themselves seemed to know that the possibility of anything going to court was minimal, as there were only 2 precedents in the country's history, and they weren't actually making that much out of their works to be worth it for the other party. Besides, they would respond accordingly if a copyright owner came in contact with them, which did actually happen. They didn't got sued, but they got a warning from TBS, Japanese TV channel, about Fujishiro Uso's water splashing exhibit, the Keion and Ichigo Mashimaro pictures. Don't sell anything from us anymore. Take it down from the web. Be careful from now on. And on the copyright side, that's the most that ended up affecting them, as far as I'm concerned. So back to talking business. Kurose had shown interest in turning Chaos Lounge into a legal organization for the sake of business. He said that in May 12, 2011, and it was almost a year later, in May 11, 2012, that a trademark was registered of the text Chaos Lounge alongside a logo. And the logo looks like this. Yep, that is Q-chan with the text Chaos Lounge decorated with the flag of Macedonia. The Majistance got a trademark, and they started joking that this was the real Chaos Lounge. It was later, however, that the trademark was transferred to this old man. Who the hell is this old man? Well, that is not Majiresu, neither the original troll or the man of the picture. It's just a guy that looked similar to him. They called him Kageresu because his name was Kageyama. This guy is a bit interesting because he was the representative of Pink Company, also known as Neta Gugenka Iinkai, a company that would turn internet memes and ideas into products. However, in full contact and collaboration with original creators, so if he was criticized for it, it wasn't much and most were fine with him. I just realized he's holding his TED Talk with the flag of Macedonia as a background. Oh, Beako, my beloved. Anyways, tons of websites with this logo and trademark were opened, which would act as another base for the Majistance. And there was one event featuring Chaos Lounge that ended up using the Q-chan logo for advertisement by accident. Kurose called it hard to forgive if it was done on purpose, but Kageyama seemed to have thought it was rather funny. Then he put the trademark of Chaos Lounge on auction, declaring it was for the sake of art. It brought the support of people like the self-proclaimed honorary leader of Chaos Lounge, Takahashi Kenji. It then reached a very real, not fake at all, 9,999,999 yen bid. But unfortunately, for some reason, it seems that the winner didn't end up paying, and eventually the trademark expired in 2017. As for the other Chaos Lounge, they had gotten a trademark registered in 2013. However, this one was written in katakana. So turns out that lawsuits did actually start happening in 2021, rather recently, but it was not for copyright. A former female employee, Anzai, posted an article online with allegations of sexual and power harassment by Kurose, workplace harassment by Uso, and another employee of Chaos Lounge. It's a whole can of worms by itself, Kurose being a married man with accusations of him making sexual advances on her while he was her boss on both Chaos Lounge and a joint venture art school between Chaos Lounge and Geidon of Hiroki Azuma. Eventually the wife finds out, wife demands her to resign from both places and to cut contact. According to Anzai, prospects of divorce were strong, so she was being pressured to leave the companies. People start learning about this, Geidon launches an investigation, they hold a meeting, Chaos Lounge refuses to collaborate, the new art school project pretty much dies there, contracts are terminated, pretty much ending the relationship with Geidon and Azuma. And then a press release is issued saying Kurose was removed from Chaos Lounge. Eventually, every single Chaos Lounge member leaves upon hearing this was happening, including Umerabo. Those members explicitly being mentioned by Anzai as not knowing any of this was happening. Those were on the words of Anzai, and Chaos Lounge claimed significant inaccuracy, so they filed a defamation lawsuit. She filed a counter-lawsuit, and then there were more lawsuits. But in the end, all the lawsuits ended up in favor of Chaos Lounge, in legal battles that lasted about 4 years. Chaos Lounge ends up run by Fujishiro Uso. However, at this point, continuing to be a contemporary art collective became impossible, as the group, which had about 30 to 50 members in its history, became a one-man company. Chaos Lounge became just a shadow of itself and will probably never come back. However, individually, every main member of Chaos Lounge are still active. Kurose is apparently still a critic, Fujishiro Uso also takes part in exhibitions himself, and Umerabo as well remains active, with a style that now includes paintwork post-collage. In the end, not much changed, it just ended up being this big mess that happened online. Many users returned to Pixiv afterwards, it was just too much of a big platform to abandon. Pixiv closed down a little over a year after the Contemporary Art Festival, and Chinami stays afloat, although it did not end up becoming the Pixiv killer. However, I saw claims that it was from the point of this Pixiv controversy that artists stopped focusing on Pixiv and their main place to post art and get attention became Twitter. And this is the general gist of the story. There's of course many other things that happened and many other people who seem to have been connected to it, but the moment you start seeing relationship charts is the moment things start getting a bit iffy, I'm not going to lie. It starts feeling a bit like they were trying to find more people to get mad at and to drag into the mess. Every source that wrote about this, it's going to be from people who clearly cared about the situation enough to create such source, which means they were all almost certainly biased against Chaos Lounge. It's not like I don't agree with some of the things said, but after a certain point, it's hard to believe that they weren't mainly treated as targets. Also, the lines seem to be different from person to person. It's okay if it's not recognizable. The internet remixes many things in which becomes new things. Why is this one any different? But that's going to be up to you to decide. I'm not going to tell you what to think of this, because honestly, pain in the ass. But I'm just going to say this. It would be hypocritical of me to take a purely anti-Chaos Lounge stance, considering 1. These videos are a collection of things I find online to put into one package, and 2. I am 100% going to make money out of this. I'm going to show my Patreon in like 2 minutes, and it's going to be really awkward, but I'm still going to do it because I do think about the future. But with that said, one of the reasons why I felt this information was being gathered to throw fuel into the fire was because there were a few times 4chan Anonymous were mentioned. They're furious and things like that. Kurose even talked about the possibility of the hacker group Anonymous being involved in this whole mess. But when I went to look into threads that were happening when this began, it was 3 threads on the anime board. There were suddenly posters mad going, "What did they do to our daughter? How dare they? Kuyashi, kuyashi!" But the first thread was derailed by people asking, why can't Japanese people speak English? Because the thread was created by someone from Futaba who came to spread the news, and they were using old machine translation, which was not good. Some people watching are not going to know how good you have nowadays. The second thread was derailed by people posting pictures of characters taking sips. The third thread was derailed by people posting Cirno and trying to get digits. After that, there was one here and there that didn't get any traction at all. So 4chan didn't get much done, and in the end, it didn't really felt like that much of a big deal in there. A lot of the discussion surrounding Chaos Lounge also evolved into copyright talk, but originally the issue was that Futaba posters didn't take kindly of them coming into their playground and having their playthings taken. Later, related websites would add a banner refusing Chaos Lounge, alongside banners refusing Netrunner. It's like they started making a collection, and from my understanding, the Majistance didn't even seem to care about any of that. They just wanted to go crazy. They found a new place to be, and it was their way to have fun. Besides, if the Majistance cared, they wouldn't be using the picture of the guy in the first place. Actually, it's been over 20 years now, and they're still memeing on the guy. But I think it's just a lot of AI videos now. This was all just a big mess. But I would be lying if it wasn't an entertaining one to look into. I found a thread of people reminiscing the event and saying all sorts of things. But honestly, I myself only cared about seeing people saying they enjoyed the Andrew WK night and the lesbian friends declaration. I think that is all I have to say about KimeKona, or how people know her in the West, Moetron. And now that you know her history, you can now say you're not LARPing her anymore. Or do it. LARP all you want, as long as you're having fun. I would like to thank Squadalo for supplying me Futaba-related KimeKona resources. I am trying to get to the Waha video, I promise. If you enjoy my videos, please support me on Patreon, and I will thank all of my lovely kind patrons now. Thanks Dark Rose, thanks Vedere P, thanks Fro116, thanks Timepiece Master, thanks Aldope, thanks Salty Taro, thanks Kylie Dragonfruit, thanks Chasad, thanks For Lajfa, thanks Alari, thanks Reses, thanks Omu, thanks Hobby Anon, thanks A Friendly Danger, thanks Bug, thanks Nady the Nut, thanks MeowMix64, thanks Snades, thanks Sauce, thanks Gansan, thanks Vic Boss, get out of here cat, thanks Tsutomu Miyazaki, thanks That One Sad Weeb, thanks Toka, thanks Sat, thanks Lime Phoenix, thanks Titan, thanks Voa, thanks A, thanks Ultra Cat Flap, thanks Gillice Here, thanks Moon Bunny, thanks Melmon, thanks Sergeant Brock, thanks Kawanerio and Kawanerina, the cat's fine by the way, Thanks Honza135. Thanks Daibo. Thanks Brian. Thanks Hatta. Thanks Willem Lenve. Thanks Premiera. Thanks Elfelt. Thanks Weisahel. And thanks Yen K. No one has ever complained that I say their names wrong. Good.